hang on, let me go back to showing. There, how are we looking now?
Okay, if you could just hop back one, that would be awesome. Back one more. One more.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. All right. So yeah, I
That's
just wanted to quickly cover that that
sure.
agenda. So first, we're going to go over the setting up jobs as we mentioned. Then we're going to cover the process for invoicing fixed price jobs, time materials jobs, and retainers individually one by one. And then we're going to look at multi-job invoicing. And in fact, I might even actually cover the retainers in the multi-job invoicing and just combine those. So that's the order that we're going to review things today.
Cool. Fancy. Well, shall I make you presenter?
You can go for it.
Oh my gosh, so exciting, Mark.
Okay. So let me know, are you able to see my screen with the system up here?
Yeah, I do. I see your demo system there.
Okay, great. I'm going to zoom it in a little bit. That's a little bit better. Okay.
Cool.
All right, great. So a couple things that I want to mention really quickly. If you do want to go into the support site, the help site, I do recommend it. Up in the top of your system there, the little question mark, you can go into the training area. You can also contact support. You can see what's new. That's where you're going to find the recordings of all these webinars. You can enter feature requests. We do read those, and we do take them very seriously, and we do catalog them. We organize them into patterns and see what people are asking for. So they don't just go into the ether. They actually are reviewed very closely. And then within the training sites, we can go into the FP library, which is a great resource. I believe it's called the Mother of How-Tos. And here you're going to find areas that are focused on different modules and different features and all the different resources that are available, including invoices here and a variety of different things on invoices, and then also all the training videos just lumped together down at the bottom there in the separate areas as well. So I do recommend checking out that help and support site. It's a good resource for a lot of information, and Emma is actually the one who creates most of the documentation that goes into that support site. She does a fantastic job of it. She does it very, very quickly as well. Pretty much the day something is released, you can find documents on it, which is great. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump in. We're going to be going for about an hour today. We try to end it at 45 minutes, but I usually use the full hour, and I have a suspicion that I will today. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go through the setup of each of these individual jobs, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to plow through this pretty quickly here, but I want to focus on a couple key points. So let's start with the easiest. Let's look at the concept of setting up a time and materials job. And in my example here, we're going to be setting up a time and materials job. We're going to be doing it for our client, let's say Canon. And we're going to estimate about $10,000 worth of work for them, but we're going to just bill them based on the time and expenses that we incur. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose to add an estimate. I'm going to call this the time and materials example job. Choose our type. We'll say that this is just a brochure, make it really simple. Company, this is for our client, not Conan, it's Canon. There we go. Not doing it for Conan the Barbarian. Select our contact at our client. AE fills in, rate category fills in. If it doesn't, you can select it. Put in the description. In this description, you may want to include how you intend to bill for the job. So, this will be billed 50% upfront and 50% upon completion. And having that, how you intend to bill the job in the description is very helpful. If you do intend to send this estimate to a client and you don't want that in the description, then you can always add it in afterwards. After you produce the client-facing version, go ahead and put that in. But that's really helpful in knowing how you intend to bill for this job. We're going to make it really simple. We're going to say that this job is due end of August, and we're going to be doing some design work and some copywriting, and we'll say that's about it. We're also going to have some expenses. We're going to be purchasing some printing, for example. Submit that, and then we'll put in our values. Now, we intend to bill this as time and expenses, so the values that we have here are an estimate for the clients, and they are truly, in this case, meant to be an estimate, because we're going to bill them for time materials, but we're going to have about 50 hours here, 50 hours here, and then maybe we're estimating about $1,000 worth of printing. We're going to mark that up by 20%. So go ahead and save that, and I'll choose then to add the job. So I now have a job with a value of $11,200. 10,000 of that is our services, and 11 or sorry, 1,200 of that is external expenses. So there's our value. We're just going to invoice that as we incur work against it. Setting up a time materials job is really simple. You're just putting in an estimate if you have a value that you need to share with the client. If you don't, then the estimate would just be for internal purposes for your own reference, and then you just bill it as you track time, which we'll see in just a minute. The next thing that's, and actually, my apologies, I just realized that I was actually completely cross-pollinating my different types of jobs here when I put in that description. So my bad for confusing that. I was talking about putting in a time materials job, and I entered a description that would imply a fixed fee. So jumbling those up a little bit, I do apologize. The description in this case, would be something related to time materials. So if you did want to put in a description that relates to how you intend to bill for the job, then this being time materials, this job will be billed monthly for time and expenses incurred. I'm glad I caught that because that wouldn't have made a lot of sense. So putting in a description as to how we intend to bill for the job. One other thing that I want to point out, actually, since we're looking at this edit job page, is the job category. Now, you are going to find this drop down on the add estimate page, and we'll see it in just a second, but this is very useful, and it's actually something I highly recommend that you use. The default values are what you see here. So anyone who's on this webinar in your function point system, you should see by default retainer, time materials, and fixed price. You might actually see fixed price plus expenses, I think is the default in our client systems. So in this case, we're going to choose it to be a time materials job. And what this does is it just allows you to search based on this category and know how you intend to bill for this job. So that's something that you'll probably want to include is the job category. And again, it has those default values already, so you don't need to do anything. You can start using that field right away. And this is a time materials job, so the accurate description is in. Submit that, and that is our time materials job entered. I then want to put in a fixed price job. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy the estimate from this and just show some of the variances, some of the differences, but there aren't too many. In the first job, we had a case where we're going to be billing time materials. We estimated about $10,000 of services, $1,200 worth of expenses. I'm looking at the estimate for that job, and I'm just going to choose to copy it. And in this case, I'm going to call it fixed price example job. Fixed price, I hear a lot of different terms for that. Project base, progress billing. There's a lot of different words I hear, or terms I hear thrown around to describe this, but it's really just a case where you have a dollar value that you've proposed to the client, and you intend to bill that dollar value regardless of the work you put in. Now, if there's a scope of work change halfway through and the client requests a whole new aspect of the project that wasn't originally agreed upon, maybe that fixed price or that project fee adjusts halfway through. But for the most part, you have a dollar amount that you've agreed upon with the client, and you intend to bill that amount with the client, usually at different intervals. I would say this is the most common type of invoicing I see from most agencies these days, is fixed price or project base. So we're going to call this our fixed price example. Let's say in this case we're doing it for a different client. We're doing it for, let's say, this one I do a bunch of work with here. Let's say North Shore Auto Group. So we're doing it with North Shore Auto Group. Choose our contact. The description in this case would be the one I put in first. So this will be billed, let's say 50% upfront and 50% upon completion. Excuse my typos there, which you can right-click, always handy for myself. Category, I'm going to be choosing fixed price. Say the delivery date's the same. Click Submit. And we've simply just copied the estimate so I didn't have to go through and put values in again. Maybe in this case, let's say it's going to be a $15,000 fixed price plus expenses. So we're going to have 75 hours here, 75 hours there. The expense in this case is going to be maybe about $500, and we're going to mark it up by 100%, coming out to $1,000. So we now have $15,000 of services and $1,000 of external expenses. We're going to bill 50% up front and 50% upon completion. Save that, and we'll choose to add job. Now, the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up a retainer job. And before I do that, I just want to talk about the different ways of managing retainers really quickly. You know, there's a lot of different ways of managing retainers and a lot of different scenarios for agencies that I hear about all the time. You might have a really simple retainer like the one I'm going to create in our example today, where there's just simply a flat dollar amount you bill the client each month, and it includes a set amount of services and a set type of services that you provide for the client. I'm going to use like a social media, SEO type of retainer. Other cases, you know, you might have a very large retainer. I've worked with agencies that are billing clients a very substantial amount every month or every quarter, and that client is able to request any number of jobs from them in that time, ranging from the full spectrum of the services that the agency provides. And we do have videos that show you the different ways of setting up these retainers, you know, simple retainers, or the term I coined a while back, robust retainers, depending on the structure that you need. But there's a very, very common theme in the setup of these retainers, and that is that in order to be able to invoice them effectively and efficiently, you need to have the estimated value equal the amount that you intend to bill upon the billing period of the retainer, whether that be monthly or quarterly. I never really see anything else. I never see annually or 6 months. I always see monthly or quarterly, usually monthly. But the value of the estimate needs to equal the amount that you intend to bill, usually every month or every quarter. So in that case, we're going to go ahead and we're going to choose to add an estimate, and let's do it for Great Atlantic Insurance. And this is going to be called the retainer example job. And let's say this is like a social media marketing retainer. And again, it's important that we'll choose a type, let's just say social media, but it's important that we choose the category to reflect how we intend to build this. So it's a retainer. The delivery date is the end of the contract, so we'll say that it's the last day of the year. Everything else looks good, and then we'll keep this really simple. We'll just choose a single service. We'll just choose client management in this case. We might even rename that on the next page. We might even just call this, like, for example, social media marketing management. And this is, retainer services. And let's say that this retainer is $2,000 per month. And our rate is $100, so we're going to have about 20 hours per month, coming out to $2,000 per month for this retainer. Again, the estimated value must equal the amount that you intend to bill every single month. Save that, and then add job. And again, you might want to put in the description how you intend to bill that and when you intend to bill it. It can be helpful for you later on. So we now have 3 jobs that we've gone ahead and set up in a way that allows us to invoice them effectively moving forward. And that's what we're going to view next is the process of individually invoicing each one of these jobs before we take a look at bulk invoicing the jobs to save us time and become more efficient. Emma, I want to check in with you. Any questions that I can answer on anything we've covered so far? Any kind of questions people are raising that you think would be good to answer?
Hey, Mark, thanks for checking in. Yeah, we haven't had questions yet, which is fine. People are obviously paying detailed attention, so that is wonderful. Questions are welcome, and as Marcus said, he'll do his best to answer if we can during the session today. So thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's take a look at the time and materials job and how we intend to invoice that. And before I do, of course, we need to have some time and materials. So if I go to my time and materials job, you'll notice I'm just hovering over jobs in view, and I've looked at it recently, so there it is, my T&M example job here. So I want to put some time against this, and I want to do that pretty quickly. So it's 30350. So let's say that we've actually had this job open for a while now. Let's say hypothetically it's been open since the start of June. So in order to make that look realistic, I'm going to open up a weekly view timesheet. I'm going to jump back into June. Let's say like the second week of June here. Notice I have a bunch of time in there, but that's okay. We'll add more. So I'm in the second week of June in my weekly view. I have job 30350. So I'm just going to choose job 30350. And I'm going to say that I did some design work here, and I put in 25 hours on this day and 12 hours on this day. Unrealistic, but let's just say that that's what I did. Maybe we'll actually drop it down a little bit. Maybe we'll say 8 and 12. That's fine. Maybe actually we'll say 7. And then perhaps I also had some other work on this as well. And instead of design, I was working on some copywriting for 5 hours and 3 3 hours. So I have some time against this job. Perhaps I have also incurred the expense as well. I'm going to do that pretty quickly here. We're going to add an expense to this job. On the job, we estimated printing to be $1,000, marked up to $1,200. Let's go ahead and let's add that expense really quickly. Let's say that we have purchased half of the printing from our supplier, Starboard Custom Printing. They gave us a reference number for the invoice. And then let's say we purchased $500 of the printing. We've purchased 500 copies. And a quantity is 500. The rate is 1. We're marking it up by 20%, and we save. Very simple to add the expense. So we now have some time materials against this job. So if we navigate back to it, we can see that we have 11,200 estimated. We have 2,900 actual, 8,300 left in the budget. We haven't invoiced anything. We have a bunch of cost against the job. So there's our profitability. We're currently negative. If we look at the financials tab, it's going to show me, and we've estimated 100 hours against this, and we've put in 23. The 100 hours coming out to $10,000. We've put in $2,300 worth of work. We haven't invoiced for anything yet. Therefore, $2,300 is currently outstanding in this time and materials job. We also have $1,000 estimated for our printing. We've purchased 500 units at a cost to our company of $500 and a post markup billable value of $600. We haven't invoiced anything, so there's $600 outstanding on this time materials job. $2,900 total, and we want to invoice that to the client. Let's say it's July 1st, we're invoicing at the end of the month, so we want to invoice that to the client. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to choose to, from the jobs details page, add new, invoice. So we're going to add an invoice for this job. We're going to leave it as interim because the job is not closing. You only choose final if it's the final invoice you will ever do on this job. And if you're not sure, when in doubt, choose interim. You can always close the job manually. It's very easy. When in doubt, just leave it as interim. Let's say we actually invoice this job on the 1st of July. So you know that you can invoice, you can change the invoice date, and that will reflect the different timesheets and expenses. And actually, I should point out, I put in that time in June, but actually didn't backdate the expense. So notice we have 0 uninvoiced external expenses. If I actually change that back to today's date, notice that changed to 1 uninvoiced external expense. So the date of the invoice is helping you to manage that time materials job to make sure that you're invoicing things within a current billing period. So we'll leave it as today's date, actually. Calculate from, we're going to choose either actuals or remainder from actuals. This essentially does the same thing. I can cause a little bit of confusion to some people. Way back when, it actually used to be 2 different calculations, but we had many agencies tell us that there was never a time that they were going to double bill their actuals, and if they did so, it's usually something that they want to have more detailed control over. So you can choose actuals or remainder from actuals, and the system will automatically calculate the value of all of your unbilled actuals. So all of your unbilled time and expenses. So this is very simple. You're just adding invoice, calculate from actuals, and select to add invoice. Now we should get an invoice here with a value of $2,900. Here's our $2,900, and it's laying out for me exactly how we're getting that value. So we have $1,500 worth of time, so we're invoicing $1,500. We have $800 worth of time here, invoicing $800. $600 worth of expenses, invoicing $600. If I want a detailed overview of what is making up this time, I can click the drop-down and see those timesheets. And I can select or deselect those timesheets if I should choose to do so. Same with the expense. By default, everything is selected, and all I need to do is produce my client-facing version and go on with my day. But I can, review the details of this if I should, choose to do so. And if I decide, what, perhaps I don't want to invoice this timesheet, I just deselect it, and then it's now $2,200. We'll say in this case we're going to invoice everything and choose to save, and that is my invoice created. Now, moving forward, and we're not going to go through another time materials invoice on this job for the sake of time, but moving forward, if we were to add more time and more expenses against this job, then the next time we go to invoice it, the system is only going to fill in the value of the unbilled time and expenses. So it really helps. It keeps it efficient and quick and easy. You just choose invoice from actuals and it automatically generates an accurate invoice, which you can manipulate in any way that you choose, all the way down to putting in your own custom values if you should do so, if you should choose. And I'm not going to click save. I'm going to leave it at 2900. So the next thing we're going to look at is going to be the fixed price invoicing. That's going to be a little bit easier and quicker than what we just took a look at. But I want to check in. Emma, any questions on anything so far?
Oh, hey, Mark. Yeah, we got a question in just about, some of these values, being concerned about not wanting necessarily all of your team to be able to see all of this information. And I had just typed back that, if the permissions are there, you should be okay. But I didn't know if you wanted to add anything on that idea.
Yeah, it's funny. Sophie was actually mentioning before that we started the webinar that maybe we should have a webinar just on permissions.
Oh, wow, that was
she's
yeah.
probably got a good idea about
yeah,
it.
I'd say so.
I was wondering if maybe we could just cover that in just a training video, but she's probably right. It might be a good idea to do a full webinar on it. But Emma is right. If you have your permissions set up accurately, then people will not be able to see that information. And typically, you'd have to go in and you'd have to really choose to give them access to it for them to see it. I mean, usually by default, a user has no permissions, and then you need to set up their permissions and choose what set they're in. So if you didn't select someone to be admin full access, then they're not going to have access to most of those rates, anyways. But, you might give them access to billing rates, which is actually something I typically recommend that you allow your staff to see, but that's a whole other conversation. But in almost all cases, they will not have access to cost rates and therefore cannot determine any kind of salary information or anything like that. So if we jump back to that job here, I just want to point out really quickly that we have invoice 2900. So we can see our invoice of 2900, and looking at our financials, this value at the bottom right is 0 because we have invoiced all of our time and expenses. So let's take a look at invoicing the fixed price job, and that's really, really simple. If we take a look at it, so our fixed price example job, we can see that this job will be billed 50% upfront and 50% upon completion. Creating this invoice is very, very simple. All we need to do is choose to, from the jobs details page, add new, invoice. The default setup in your system is for it to default to estimated values as far as how to calculate the invoice from. You can either change that, as I did a minute ago for the other invoice. You can also change the default, but most of the time this is going to be the default, and that's usually what you want. And it's really easy. All I do is I put in a billing percentage, 50%, select that invoice, and I have an invoice then of 50%. Now, notice that we're looking at the same page. We have 50% of the value of the estimate. We do not have any actuals. We also have 50% of the value of the expense. That's something a lot of agencies don't do. They'll bill 50% of the services up front, but they bill the expenses as they're incurred. If that's the case, we would just simply delete this value out and choose not to invoice it. Now, if you want to play around with the values here, you have a lot of control. We can delete this out. I can type in anything I want into these different fields. Furthermore, I can also adjust the billing percentage. We'll say 25% of estimate. It fills in 25% of my estimate. We'll go back to 50, click estimate, puts in 50%, delete the expense value, and save the invoice. So you're just putting in the billing percentage, you're clicking save, and then going on with your day. Very, very easy, not very time consuming. The only thing that you need to kind of keep track of is if you are a project billing agency, a fixed price agency, a progress billing agency, whatever you want to call it, and you have your account executives, selling a lot of different projects and different work to different clients with different billing structures. One client you bill 25% up front, another's 100% upon completion, another one is a third at different months. Then you just need to make sure that you're recording this information somewhere. The estimate / job description is a good space for it. And then you just need to make sure that you're on top of that so that to look at the jobs and see which ones to invoice and when, and I'm going to actually show a little bit of how you can manage that. But you just need to, if you're kind of getting all over the place with how you bill all your different clients, then you're adding complexity, and I understand that that's sometimes just how the agency world works. So you just need to make sure you're on top of it. You're putting in the descriptions when you intend to bill, so that you are accurately invoicing the client when you should be. So the last thing that I want to take a look at here on this particular topic is invoicing the retainer job. And I'm going to show you individually. I wasn't sure if I was going to, but I think I am. I'm going to show you the invoicing of it individually, but we're also going to cover it in multi-job invoicing as well. So let's take a look at the first one. So let's look at our retainer job example. I mentioned earlier that the most important thing about setting up a retainer, whether it's a large project or campaign retainer that includes multiple jobs, or if it's just an individual job, no matter how you're doing it, you need to have the estimated value of the job that you intend to use for billing be the value of the retainer, whether it's monthly or quarterly. This is the amount that you need to be setting up the estimate for, the amount that you intend to bill. We'll say in this case monthly, therefore this is the amount you bill every single month. When we look at the financials, we're going to see social media marketing management, and it's 20 hours and it's $2,000. I realize we don't have any actuals against this. I'm not going to take the time to put those in because we're just looking at billing. But the process for billing these retainers, if you have the estimated value equal the amount you intend to bill each month, is very, very simple. It's the easiest of all. All you do is from the jobs details page, select Add New, Invoice, and then just simply click Add Invoice, because the default value is 100% of the estimate. Therefore, it automatically generates an estimate for $2,000. Now, this client actually, it looks as though they have some tax on there. So this particular client I selected, Great Atlantic Insurance, looks as though they have some tax set up on their account. So we charge tax to this particular company, perhaps based on their location. So it's adding a 6% tax. But aside from that, it's a $2,000 subtotal on the invoice. So it just generates an invoice with a value that you intend to bill every single month, and it's as easy as that. You just add new, invoice, and then you don't even need to save because it's saved automatically. You can just move on. Print your client-facing version and again move on with your day because it just takes you 2 clicks. So the next thing that we're going to take a look at is more multi-job invoicing and the process for pulling up multiple jobs all at the same time based on how you bill them, maybe at the end of every month, and then running through those multi-job invoicing processes and answering any questions that come up from those. Probably hasn't been any new ones, but Emma, I'll check in anyways. Has there been any new questions that have come in that we can answer?
Oh, hey, Mark. I think we're doing okay. We had one come in that Sophie's going to answer shortly, just about different invoice types. But anyone else, feel free to send in your questions. But so far, so good.
Sounds good. All right, so the first thing that I want to touch on is time and materials billing. And I know that this isn't as common for a lot of agencies these days. 10 years ago, it was all the rage. Agencies traditionally were billing based on the time that they spent on things, and that's not always the case anymore. But I know in a lot of agencies I speak with, at least some of their work is, and invoicing that can be pretty straightforward. All we're doing is we're going to do a job find. And each of these processes is going to start with a job find. So we're going to do a job find for a category of time materials. And instead of clicking Find Jobs, we're going to choose Find Active. Now you can be more specific and choose from your statuses, and I have a whole bunch in my system. But a really easy way to go about this is just choose a category and select Find Active. Here's a list of all of my active time and materials billing jobs. And there's 13 of them, and some people on this call are probably thinking, yeah, that's probably a third of the jobs we have, which is about a third of the jobs I have in my system, and that makes sense. Other agencies, your other people on this webinar are probably looking at that and thinking, we have 13 jobs come in every hour, so there's a wide spectrum of how many active jobs you might have. So I understand that this might not be exactly the length of the list that you would see, but the process is the same. So looking at these jobs, we're looking at a default column setup. If you have never customized the columns in your system and you do a job find, then this is exactly what you're going to see. This is showing us the clients, the name of the job, the type, the status, the due date, and then financial values. Estimated, actual, being the value of time and expenses. the variance between your estimated and your actual, how much you've invoiced the client so far, and then a balance outstanding, comparing how much you've invoiced the client with the value of the work that you've done. So where we say a negative number, it's just letting us know that we've invoiced, in this case, $1,200 less than the work that we've done. But there's also some cases where it's a zero because we've invoiced for everything. There's no outstanding unbilled work. And then actually you could see a plus here if you've invoiced for more than the value of the work that you've done, which is probably not something that you'll see in a time and materials example, but it might be it actually will be something that you'll see in the case of a fixed price where you're billing up front. You will have invoiced more than the value of the work that you've done. But what we want to do now is we want to generate invoices for all these jobs, and we want to do it quickly. We want it to take us like 3-4 minutes so that we can generate those invoices and then move on. We don't want to have to go through and spend hours doing all this invoicing. We want it to be quick and easy. So we produce the list, and then from the top we choose batch invoice add. Now it's going to ask you for a name. I'll be honest, the name doesn't really come into play all that much. So usually what you're going to want to do is put a date on it. So we're just going to call this time and materials July batch. Keep it simple. These are interim invoices, and we're going to calculate from actuals. Again, either actuals or remainder from actuals is going to calculate the value of all of your unbilled time and expenses. So we're going to choose to add batch invoice. On the next page, it's really just an overview. You shouldn't really need to do anything here. There's some stuff around accounts receivable. I'm not really going to get too much into the accounting stuff, but most of the time you have a single accounts receivable. If you have different accounts receivables for different companies, then you can use the company accounts receivable accounts. So if you have companies in different countries and you have different AR accounts for those, then you can select to use the specific AR accounts for their locations. For the most part, most agencies, most people listening to this webinar, you don't really need to do anything on this page. You just click Next, Add Jobs to Batch. Now this then shows us a list of all of these jobs, and it shows us the amounts we were looking at a second ago, but this invoice amount is how much you intend to invoice right now. Now you can add them one by one, but what I usually do is I hit Add All, and then I look at what the values are. So I select Add All, and I've now invoiced $1,200 for Travel Kit New Package Design, $44.97.50 for Branson Airways, and so on and so forth. But then I have $0 for online survey invitation. I don't need a $0 invoice. Let's get rid of that one. I also have $0 for display for Galaxy Notes. Let's get rid of that one too. And I have $0 for this time material example job because we already invoiced that one on its own. So let's just get rid of that. And those are now gone. And then let's say that for some reason I know that the winter driving school program brochure, we're invoicing $57.70, but I know that some weird stuff happened with that job, and I don't trust this number, or I know that it's too high and I need to do something with it. It's very easy. I can choose to edit, and I get the full invoicing edit option right from this page without needing to move anywhere. And then I can just choose, okay, you know what, we spent a bunch of time in research that we can't bill for, so let's just go ahead and not bill for that time. Unselect it, and then save and close. And this allows you to go through each of these jobs and edit exactly what you intend to invoice, all within this page without having to move different areas of the system. So you have full editing options, full invoicing options from this single location. Once we're satisfied with what we have here, we choose Finish Adding to Batch, and our invoices are now created. Now, we now have all of these invoices in a batch. And if we look at the batch, so notice how we're looking at invoice 146, and I can produce this invoice. This is a single invoice. So I can produce this invoice. This is a single invoice to one client for $1,200. But I can look at the batch and see all of the different invoices for these. And I can navigate to them, and I can produce a PDF for all of them. But you can also choose to notify selected. And if I select Notify Selected, it's going to send an invoice out to every single client that I've selected here. Every single invoice I've created, all of those clients are going to get an email with the PDF invoice attached, maybe a link to the portal if you're using it, with the content that you have here. You can also drop in a template if you have a template that you prefer that can pull in first names and last names. So there's, it's really easy. In a couple clicks, you can send all of those invoices out. You save it as a note for having a record that that invoice has gone out. You click send and it goes. Now I'm like 99.9999999% sure that every single invoice we have in this demonstration system is completely fake, but I'm still not going to hit send just in case. So I'm going to hit cancel there. But the point is that you can send them all out instantly. If you're not comfortable with that, maybe you're new to the system or you just haven't tested that out yet and you're not quite comfortable, you can easily go to each of these invoices, produce the PDF, and then send them over to the client. And you can also post all of them right from here too if you are syncing with FP Accountant. So this batch invoicing, it facilitates an invoicing process that gives you full control over the detail of the invoice, allows you to send it out to all the clients right as soon as you're done. And it can, I've heard stories of agencies saying that they were having an invoicing process that literally took them a day or 2 days of a person's time, all down to maybe 15 minutes. So it's saving them 8 to 12 hours every single month, which is a huge benefit. So really good processes for this, and it also applies to the retainer invoicing, which I'm going to show in just a second. But before I do, Emma, I just want to check in any questions on any of this stuff so far.
Hey, no, we are doing well so far. Thank you. Oh, well, we just got one in that we may as well ask since we're on the right screen. Melissa, just asking about the post button, if you could maybe speak to that briefly.
Yeah, for sure. So whether we're posting the invoice we're looking at it, again, we are looking at invoice 146, and we can see the details of that invoice, but we can also see the batch that it belongs to. We can post this invoice, which tells the system that the next time a sync is run with QuickBooks, that this invoice will go over to QuickBooks. If we do it from the batch, we post all these invoices, which we'll go ahead and do. Actually, it's just letting me know I wasn't sure if I had actually set up the system to integrate with QuickBooks, and it looks as though I haven't. But if I were to choose to post all those invoices, then it would post all the invoices with just one click, and the next time we run a sync with QuickBooks, all these invoices would go over automatically. So the next thing that we're going to take a look at is the retainer multi-job invoicing. And this is actually just as easy as what we just looked at, but it's a little bit different. So if we were to do a job find, and just like before, we're going to use the category, select retainer, and select find active. So here we have a list of 4 retainers. And let's say that in these cases, we're billing the client the estimated amount monthly. So we have $2,000 SEO retainer here, a $2,000 social media retainer here. We have a $10,000 retainer for our client Safeway, and we have another $2,000 retainer here for Great Atlantic Insurance, another social media marketing retainer. So let's say that in this example, we're invoicing these clients these amounts every single month, but any expenses that are incurred are additional on top of the monthly retainer. So we're billing the client additional for any expenses incurred. So the process is similar. What we're going to do is up at the top, select Batch Invoice Add. In this case, we're going to call this retainer July 2015 batch. And we're going to leave it as estimated because the estimated amount equals the amount we intend to bill every month. Select Add Batch Invoice. Leave this page as it is. Select Next. And then we have our 4 jobs. So we're going to choose to add all because we do intend to invoice them for their amounts. So we have 2,000, 2,000, 10,000, 2,000. But what we need to see is, do any of these have expenses that need to be billed? So first, let's look at Mac & Co. SEO retainer. So choose to edit, and I can see that I do not have any external expenses. So I say cancel. Let's look at the NAG SMM retainer for July. Edit that. And again, I do not have any expenses. I'm not seeing any external expenses here. So we'll cancel that. Let's look at the Safeway monthly retainer. And I can see that I do have external expenses. And do I have any unbilled external expenses? And I do. I have one entered today, printing of 5,000 new area flyers, or somehow in relation to this retainer. Now, when I look at this, I can see that the total value of my expenses is $4,000. We've previously invoiced $2,500. So, but there's a value here that hasn't been invoiced, and we can see that there's one expense. The date of the expense and the date of the invoice allows this to be a very easy process for you. There are expenses against this job that I am not seeing, and I'm not seeing because I've already billed them in previous months. Any expense that has not been billed will be shown here, and all I need to do is just go through and check. Click the box. Do I see the words external expenses? If I do, select to see if there are any that are unbilled, and there's one. So I'm going to choose to invoice it, and it bumps the invoice from $10,000 to $11,500. Save and close, and then we can check our last retainer, and there are no external expenses. So we cancel that. So, it's a bit of a process. You need to go through each one, and you need to make sure that there are no unbilled external expenses. But if there are, they will be displayed to you very clearly. You just click the box, click Save, and it adds it to the invoice for that retainer. Click Finish Adding to Batch, and we've generated invoices for those 4 separate retainer jobs. We can then, again, produce our PDF of each one individually, or notify each client individually of the invoices and have that get sent out to them automatically. So again, it's just about setting up those retainers so that you can bill them efficiently every month by having the estimated value equal the amount you intend to bill each month. There are very, very effective ways of reporting on the monthly performance of each retainer. There are filters that you can use on the Jobs Financials tabs for each job that's going to tell you exactly how the retainer performed every single month, as well as overall performance for the lifespan of the retainer. And you're going to see that in the videos that I was mentioning that we'll send out links to in the follow-up email. So just know that having the value of the estimate equal the amount you intend to bill each month, it allows you for efficient invoicing, but it's also going to help you out in reporting on the monthly performance or quarterly performance, if that's how you bill, of each retainer that you have. So it's effective if you set it up correctly, and invoicing them is pretty quick and pretty easy. The last thing I want to touch on is why you traditionally cannot batch invoice project-based or fixed fee jobs, but some methods and some tools that are at your disposal to still make it a little bit quick and easy. Before I do that, Emma, any questions on the retainer batch invoicing or anything we've covered in the last few minutes?
Hey, Mark. Yeah, we've had a few questions about retainers, making me think that it might be worth maybe adding to a future series some retainer-based subjects. I've offered to one person who's reached out already to send some links to documents and videos, because there are different ways you can do it. The question was about, do I need to do a job each month for the billing, or can I keep the same job for the billing? And we know that there are lots of options there. So no specific question for you to answer your question, but it might be worth considering doing a retainer series. And anyone, if you want links to any of that retainer type stuff, just let me know, and I will make sure we email you that stuff.
Sounds good. Yeah, as I mentioned at the start, there are a lot of different ways to cut this pie of retainers. I was going to use an animal-related analogy, but then I realized Emma is a huge animal lover, as am I, and she would have been upset if I had animal analogy.
That's good, Mark. I'm glad you know where your vegan bread is buttered. That's very good.
You got it. Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to manage those retainers, and there are effective methods in Function Point to manage each different type that you might have. The question was asked, do I need to have a job each month? The answer is really just, it depends on you. Having a job for each month allows you for quicker reporting at a glance, instant view into how each month has performed, but it means that you need to close and open a job every single month. And you typically would preload them for the entire year, so that opening and closing process is pretty simple, but it still needs to be done. Whereas if you do not open up a job every single month and you just have one that just sits there and you just bill every month, you time track to it every month, and it's the same job that you use all the time, that means no opening and closing, but it means that you need to apply date filters when you're wanting to report on the performance of the monthly retainer. So there's some different scenarios there, and there's some plus and minuses of the different options. And the video kind of outlines those different options, and you can decide which one works best for you. So in the 10 minutes or so that we have left, I want to touch on the project-based. I use project-based and fixed fee billing interchangeably because I hear those all the time. Why you typically can't batch invoice those, but what you can do to help you out anyways. So I'm going to do a job find for category of fixed price, and I'm going to click Find Active. And I can see that I have 13 fixed price jobs here. And let's see, I'm just kind of looking at the values, and I think for most of them, it looks as though the value of the work that we've done is less than the value of the invoice, which is actually not always the case. I mean, our one example that we created earlier today is a common thing that you'll see. Let's put that at the top here. Here's our fixed price example job. Notice that we have 16,000 estimated. We have no actuals. We've already invoiced the client 7,500, and 7,500 was half of the $15,000 of internal services, and that's $7,500 more than the work that we've done. And that's something that you're going to see. You're going to see positive values here because you're typically invoicing something up front before you've done any work. Therefore, the amount of the invoice is more than the amount of the actuals. But kind of back to the point of why you often can't use the batch invoice here, or why it's a little bit tougher. It's because usually you're not invoicing these based on time. You're invoicing them based on deliverables. So you might have one job you're invoicing 50% up front, you're invoicing 25% upon a milestone, and another 25% upon another milestone, and then plus any out of scope work adjustments will be billed upon completion. So you might have other jobs that are completely different scenarios. So therefore, there's no stagnant value, whether it be the estimates or the actual, that equals the amount you intend to bill at certain time intervals. So that means you really need to look at each job independently and typically invoice them on their own. Now, what you could do is you could use this list to assist you in that, and you can do that by managing the columns. So let's choose to manage the columns. And let's add and subtract some things that we may need or may not. So first of all, I'm going to take out the edit button because I don't need that on the list. I'm going to add in the job category, and I'm going to add in the job description. And because I'm zoomed in on the page, that actually might cause one of the columns to get cut off. We'll see. Sometimes when you zoom in to make it bigger for the webinar, and then you add in a column that could have a large amount of text, it might cut off a little bit of it, but we'll see about that in just a second. What else do I need? Let's say office I don't need. AE I don't need for now. I don't really need type either. But I want status. I want due dates. Take out project for now. And then I have some financial values, some standard financials. I could also include estimated and actual hours. And I could also include a host of other more advanced financial information as well if I want to see specific values around how much have we invoiced for externals versus internal services, and a lot of other really cool things here. But let's go ahead and let's move the job description. I want it over by the due date, and then I want the category by the status. So that looks pretty good. Save that. And there we are. And I actually didn't cut off the last column, which is nice. I wasn't sure if it would. So notice now that I have a list of all of my fixed price jobs, and I can see this will be billed 50% up front and 50% upon completion. That's letting me know how I intend to bill for this job. Now you might have, of course, a much larger overall description, and how you intend to bill it might be embedded in there some, so it might not be as clear cut as what you're seeing here, but it can still be there. And you can actually have, there's another description you can put in here as well, called the date description, which I might show in a second. But the point I'm trying to make is that this allows you to quickly skim. This is a list of all of our active fixed price jobs, and I can see exactly what the estimated value was, the fixed price, compared to what we've invoiced. And then from here, I can make the choice of clicking on the job and then going ahead and choosing to add new invoice and doing them one by one. Once I had that invoice, I would then jump back to the job list by clicking on the header and it brings me directly back to that list. So I'm invoicing them one by one, but I'm using this setup to quickly jump back to a list which tells me what to bill, generate the invoice, back to the list, generate the invoice. If you really wanted to, you could do a batch invoice add, and you would just need to be a little bit on top of things. So for example, I might produce that job list in another tab so I can come back to it. And then in this case, I'm going to call this, fixed price, July 2015 batch. The calculate from doesn't really matter because I'm going to have to edit all of them anyways. I'm going to choose to add batch invoice, click next, and then here I have all of them. And I would just go through and say, okay, well, I have my fixed price example job. They default to be organized by creation, so that's why it's at the bottom there. And let's say I know that I want to build a second 50% of this. So I would choose to add that in. I'd edit it, and I'd say 50% of estimates, maybe 100% of the expense, save and close, and that's an invoice for this job, 8,500 in this case. And I would just go through and invoice them all from this page. And then when I get to the corporate website job, well, what do I need to bill for this? I have no idea. There's nothing on this page that's letting me know. So in that case, I can review back to my jobs list, or if I add it in here, I believe that you can see it in this description box here as well. So that allows you, to add them in. If you've put it in the description, view exactly what you should be billing, and then manipulate the invoice to be the value that you need, save and close, and then that invoice is created. So, the point I'm trying to make is that there's no kind of quick and easy. It's not like, okay, well, everything is 100% of estimate or 100% of actuals. Each one's going to be different, but you can go through and you can add each one, edit it, review the description, change the values, save and close, and then move on to the next. So this is still a really effective page for being able to do a lot of individual invoicing quickly and manipulating each one as you go along. So I'd recommend, for something like this, give it a try at the end of a month. Produce all the jobs based on category in a list, add the batch invoice, go through them one by one, and see if that saves you some time. It probably will if you have descriptions that help you and let you know what you need to be invoicing. You'll probably save a little bit of time, and you'll probably like this interface because I feel like it works really, really well. Any questions on that fixed price overview at all?
Not specifically to that, Mark, but we did have a little bit of a question, which I think you've addressed a bit here, with batching based on sort of category, and that could be used in different ways, and there are different ways to, get a group of jobs so that they all can be batched together. We had a question coming just about terms. So, if you've got a whole bunch of clients that are net 30 versus net 60, you could sort of batch all your net 30s and all your net 60s. And it's slightly off topic, I know, but hopefully I'm not throwing you off your game there by bringing that up.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I'm not sure. I'd have to kind of experiment and see here. So I'm not seeing, because that's a good point. Some clients might have different terms. So if we were to...
I looked into it. Sorry, not to interrupt you, but offline, I went and looked. And if you do a batch, once the batch is created, you can go and edit individual invoices within the batch and change the terms. But, if you had like half and half that you were going to have to go change, it may be better to do a batch based on, which terms they were going to use.
Oh, that's a good point. I'm just taking a look here and seeing if the terms, I'm seeing them here, I'm looking to see if you can establish them beforehand so that they all automatically...
Yeah, they're on the invoice, specifically the payment terms. So, it would be something you could maybe use work type or something to establish that. Because that's estimate terms.
These are estimate terms, right?
Yeah.
That's a really good point. If we go to the next page here, there's 3 invoices in this batch. Let's finish and add that.
Yeah. Once you're in there, then you can see you can edit it now. You can edit this individual one to change the term. So if you're doing that for 1 out of 3, it's not a big deal. But if you had like 50 invoices in a batch and you needed to change 25 of them, you may want to maybe batch based on terms as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
But again,
Like,
yeah.
can you do a job find based on? I mean, like you said, you'd have to use work type or
Yeah,
something else. Yeah.
yeah, you would. And that may not apply to the client that was reaching out, but just thought I'd throw it out there in case anyone else was wondering, because when you make the batch, you do pick the terms when you're making the batch, but it doesn't mean that if one in the batch or two in the batch need different terms, you still can go change those individual ones. So just thought it worth throwing that in there since we had a few minutes left here. You've done
Yeah,
very
that's a good
well on
point.
time today, Mark, by the way. We're still under
Oh,
an
I
hour.
appreciate it.
Yeah, well,
I really thought I was going to go over. I didn't say anything,
it's because you
but I
didn't
thought that.
rant. You didn't have a rant. I was waiting for one of the Mark rants, and you didn't rant where I expected you to rant. I'm very
Oh,
impressed.
really? Because I was thinking about throwing one down right now, actually.
Oh, I wonder if it's going to be what I wonder if it's going to be about what I think it's going to be about. But I'll let
You're
you rant.
you're thinking I'm going to talk about consistency of
Yes,
client billing, I'm sure, right?
yes,
Okay.
that's what I
So
thought.
I'm going to throw that one down really quickly, and then I'm going
Okay.
to show something else that I think is really valuable. In fact, let me show you the valuable thing first,
Okay.
and then if people want to leave, so they don't have to listen to my rant, then that's cool too. One thing I want to mention really quickly is that sometimes when I work with agencies that have been using the system for a while, just based on how it's been used, the find active button is not effective for them because they have so many jobs that are done but they haven't been closed. And there's a bunch of different reasons why that might be. I have 46 active jobs, but I'll tell you right now, Function Point is very effective for you if the job statuses are managed and providing you with a simple list of everything that's currently open and active. So if you do a job find and you do find active and you see a whole bunch of stuff there that shouldn't be there, and you can see that by sorting by due date or sorting by number. I was working with an agency the other day, and I did a sort by number, and the due date on some of them was like 2013. So I asked them, is this still open? And they said, no, that's been closed for years. So the way to fix that is select the list to be editable, and then just go ahead, again, sort it by numbers so that you have the oldest stuff at the top, and then just go ahead and change the statuses and ignore the amount of statuses I have. But go ahead and put it to completed or closed or invoiced, whatever status you use to mark completed jobs, and just go through and get rid of all the ones that aren't actually active. If you have like a couple hundred, it might take you an hour, at most probably less, maybe half an hour. But it's very, very beneficial to do that. So you're going to want to make sure that when you do a job find and you click Find Active, that you don't get anything in there that's old that shouldn't be there. And if you do, then use the editable list view and clean it up. So that was a useful tidbit. One other thing I wanted to mention, Emma's prediction of my rant, I'm only going to take like 30 seconds, is around invoicing. So when you're have your account executives selling new clients, or when you're in conversations with existing clients, there's certain things that can be up for negotiation, like what are the payment terms on the invoice? How quickly do the clients have to pay? How much do you bill up front? How much do you bill upon completion? Are retainer expenses included, or are they not? Are they on a separate invoice or the same invoice? The more consistent you can be, the easier your life is going to be. If you can, come up with a standard operating procedure for the agency, and then have other things be what you negotiate with, things other than when the client pays or how they pay or what the invoice looks like and things like that. I know that this isn't always possible. It's not always realistic. If you have a huge client that is demanding certain things, and it's either do what they say or don't work with them, I get that. But if at all possible, if you can organize your billing and make it consistent, and maybe it might take you a couple of years to do so, just as you renegotiate contracts with clients, just try to corral them all into a similar billing structure. Your life is going to be so much easier, and this is a huge problem I see facing so many different agencies, especially agencies that are somewhat new and have only been around for 4 or 5 years and have so many different, and they've allowed clients to kind of dictate how they bill. It can get pretty tough. So just a little bit of a rant there, something I recommend.
Well,
And then,
that wasn't as ranty as I was hoping for, but it was good. I still feel like my rant itch has been scratched, so
well,
that's
that's
good.
nice.
Yeah.
I aim to please.
Thank you.
And then the last thing I want to do is just run a quick poll. This is the third webinar of our fp.Expert webinar series, which is running in cycles. So the next one is the FP Accountants, and then the entire series is going to run again immediately. So every 2 weeks there's a webinar on Wednesday, and it's going to continue to run. The topics might change after the next cycle, based on requests we're getting from people. And we might do something additional to that, but we're learning as we go here. I want to make sure that these webinars are valuable for you. I want to make sure that you're getting good information out of them. So just a quick poll, and then feel free to respond to the follow-up email and just let us know if you have any requests for anything else that you'd like to see. So or changes or adjustments or other rant requests if you have them. And we want to make sure we're giving you guys a lot of benefit out of these webinars. So let us know and be honest so that we can make improvements where necessary.
Well, it sounded like Sophie had a good idea about permissions, because that is it's a big piece, but I find once you're familiar with sort of the layout of it, it's pretty cool how specific you can get about what you give and don't give to people.
For sure.
Excellent. Well, we've had about 3/4 of everyone vote, so thank you for that. Mark, do you want me to leave it open for a couple more moments here, or let her shut her down? The poll.
Why don't you leave it open for like a minute or two, and,
sure.
And if any questions do come in at that time, great. And then after that, we can close it down. Anything we didn't answer during the webinar, we'll follow up with as well.
Great. And now we've had 85% vote, so thank you very much for your feedback on that. I'm going to close the poll. Oh, 89%. Maybe I should leave the poll open. Wow, this is going well. Excellent. So 2 weeks from today, Mark, all about Function Point Accountant. Any preview about that, or who might be good attendees for that one?
Really anybody that's using QuickBooks integration. The thing with that, kind of like the retainer situation, is that everyone is so different, and the questions might be apply to some agencies, but might completely not apply to others. So it's going to be a challenging one. I'm going to be asking Jeremy, who is the lead of our support team and who is the most knowledgeable person here on QuickBooks integration. I'm going to be asking him to join and help to answer some of the more complex questions via moderation. So that he can kind of be there to assist. And I asked him about that this morning. He said that he'd be happy to help out. And it's really just going to be about aspects of the setup, how things link together, what relates to what, and then what the operational side of the integration looks like. So how to make sure that that you have everything posted and everything's synced, and that you're not missing anything, and how you can sleep at night, how you can feel comfortable knowing that Function Point and QuickBooks match together and are in harmonious sync, and hopefully answer any questions that people have around those procedures.
That's great, Mark. Okay, well, we'll leave the session running. I've got a couple of questions I'm just going to answer by typing, so hang tight, people, for that. And otherwise, thank you again, Mark. The recording will get posted later today or tomorrow to our help site and a couple of other places. And follow-up questions welcome, I guess, just to success@functionpoint.com, yeah?
You got it.
Okay, excellent. Thanks so much, Mark.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Take care.